A drawing can become a battlefield. The thing comes alive and dies on you, comes alive and dies on you. And you battle on. In some drawings you battle on. Other drawings can happen like gifts from God extremely quickly. Okay. Your feet are apart. And your feet are more back. And your legs are straight. I don't think you should have any ideas at the beginning. You are just hoping that by being in tune, by your eyes working for you, by being yourself fully present in front of this bit of truth, you are hoping something will happen. I don't agree with removing the mystery from art, which a lot of people try to do. It's a very mysterious business. I don't understand it. Why should other people expect to understand it?
Maggi Hambling is perhaps best known as a painter of portraits. Many of her recent paintings and drawings, however, are concerned with exploring the twin themes of sunrise and sunset, sometimes painted directly from life, sometimes from memory, and sometimes from imagination. But whatever her subject matter or way of working, Maggi Hambling sees figure drawing from life as a fundamental discipline, a vital part of her routine as an artist.
Drawing, I think, is the basis of everything for me, because it keeps you in tune, if you like. It's like a pianist with the scales, a dancer doing exercises. I think it's the most intimate thing an artist does. It is your response with the whole of you, but using your eyes. I mean, there's no time for ideas. Ideas are a waste of time. I mean, you are desperately trying to make some marks with whatever you're using that say something about that living person in front of you.
Why do you use the phrase mark making rather than making a line, which is what perhaps most people would say?
Well, because if you're drawing with a brush and ink, for instance, you're making a set of marks. If you're drawing with a piece of charcoal, which is capable of an almost infinite number of different marks, you're making marks. I don't know why people should really think of drawing as being line at all. I think it's a set of marks, and if you're lucky, they're the right marks in the right places.
Why do you think line is inappropriate?
Because, as I've just said, almost anything you draw with is capable of a whole set and range of different marks. And each time you draw, you're trying to discover just that mark, which at that moment is the truth about that knee, for instance. You see, I think that when you're drawing from life, it has to be as though you have never seen a knee before, or a foot, or an eyebrow, or anything. And so you are discovering, or trying to see and trying to discover in the marks you're making, in the way you are looking, the way you're seeing. You're trying to create that knee, or that eyebrow, or that foot afresh each time, because each time it is different.
How do you create that freshness?
Well, I think you try to empty yourself so that you can see clearly. And, as I say, rid your whole self of any memory, of any ear, that you've ever drawn before, so that you're seeing this ear as if for the first time. And then I think you're in the right state to possibly discover the right marks to say that ear. When it's going well, something is coming from that thing that you're responding to, through you and out onto the paper.
So when you started drawing, you don't know where you're going?
Absolutely right. Giacometti likened the process of making art to a blind man groping in darkness. And I think that's really how it should be. Percy agrees with me. I tend to draw in a sketchbook with a stick of graphite, which is, I believe, the stuff that's in the middle of a pencil nowadays rather than lead. I use graphite because the scale of the mark seems right for the scale of the piece of paper. And it's a big, thick stick, and it has the possibilities of producing marks that I didn't know were going to happen, which is marvelous. And the marks that I'm making are made very, very quickly. I mean, if you have a model in a series of quick poses, then quite obviously you have to work very quickly. And your eyes working through the subject, around and through the subject the whole time, so that you finally begin to see where an ear is in relation to a heel, or where a breast is in relation to a knee, whatever it may be. You're gradually evolving this thing, but by your eye really working like a lightning dart, going through the whole of that person and the whole of the space, the whole of the time. But I never think about technique. You see, you can become in love with a way of doing something, so the drawing stops being a new thing each time, and it will then become mannered and then finally dead. If you ever feel you know how to draw, then there's not much point in doing it, because, as I said, each time it's different, each time it's new. Okay. Knees bent. Each time you draw, you must be in the state of mind and heart and the way you're looking, as if you've never seen a knee before in your life, as if you've never seen an eyebrow before. I mean, the body is full of these extraordinary events, like knees and eyebrows and eyelashes and toes and all these many things. And you have to bring these many incidents together into one living person. And it is very easy to get seduced by the lies and myths that are happening on the piece of paper. And so it is removing itself entirely from the truth. The point about drawing from life is that a sort of circle has to go on between the model, which is the truth, being received by your eyes, by your whole body, out through your arm, to the instrument you're using to make that mark. And so every mark is dictated by the subject. The subject is in charge of you and in charge of the marks that you hope to discover. This is incredibly important. Otherwise, the model might as well be in one room and you in another room. And if you take your eyes away from the truth when you make the mark, then you're working from memory. And this is how the lies begin. The light caresses the body, and the light is changing, and the model is breathing, and you're trying to get into the drawing that moment, that particular moment of that model being in that position. If the marks on the paper aren't sensual, what's the point? I mean, you're drawing flesh. I mean, and the sensual touch of the instrument on the paper, what else have you got? The most difficult decision in the whole business is to know when to stop, to know when you're finished. And generally that means the moment I find that I'm making a mark in some way tidying something up, the minute that might begin to happen, that is clearly the moment to stop.
When you were talking about the artist being a channel, as it were, for expressing the truth of the object, does that mean that the artist is being objective, or is the artist inevitably subjective?
I think inevitably, I think inevitably one is subjective. It is useful, that is why it is useful to look at the reflection of a painting that you're working on in a mirror, because then you can more easily get outside it and you see it more objectively. You see what distortions you're making and you can decide whether you want them or not. And so a mirror can be quite useful because it removes you, because obviously when you're making a painting, making a drawing, you're so completely involved in the thing that you can't stand back from it.
It's a very intimate relationship between the subject and the artist.
Of course, one is obsessed with the subject. Otherwise it's not going to be any good.
In the finished drawing, how much do you think is the subject and how much the artist?
That's a very difficult question, because obviously a dozen artists drawing the same model will produce quite different things. When I talk about truth, all I could say is I try to make my response, which is quite different from another artist's response, as truthful as I can make it, for me.
Is that the most difficult part of drawing?
Drawing is a very difficult business, altogether. And that is, I'm not really crazy about the word sketch, because I think the word sketch implies something almost casual and throwaway. And I think whatever you're drawing on, a paper napkin in a restaurant, the grandest piece of paper that you could buy, you are addressing yourself to that piece of paper with whatever is in your hand. And it is from the start, it is a drawing. Because you are taking into consideration the edges of that piece of paper, because the edges of the piece of paper define the space, just as the edges of the canvas define your space that you're working in a painting. The edges of the piece of paper define the space that you are occupying with these marks to make this drawing. And so I think it's quite a serious business. We are now in the print room of the British Museum, where anyone can come to look at these magical things. I'm looking at a late crucifixion drawing by Michelangelo, which I would say is one of the greatest masterpieces of all time. The way to approach a masterpiece is in silence in order that it can speak to you. The medium is black chalk, corrected by white. It's always quite a comfort to see where people, even Michelangelo, have had to make corrections. And I mean, the drawing has been worked on a great deal. A lot of the chasing of mark after mark to discover the outline of the figure of Christ. I mean, very often a very great sculptor has the capacity to carve the form out of the paper, and that is certainly what Michelangelo has done. The second masterpiece, I have chosen this girl sleeping, possibly Hendrik Stoffels by Rembrandt, this time in a brush and sepia wash. And it's a very intimate drawing. I mean, it is a drawing of one of the artist's lovers, and it is a drawing done with a great deal of love, combined with a masterful technique. The drawing seems to me to have been executed in a very, very few moments. But it has the kind of electricity about it of being done extremely quickly. And the life in each of these brush marks, I mean, very close to Eastern calligraphy, as you can see, which is, of course, a very difficult thing to do because one wrong mark and you've had it. I believe very much in making the sheet of paper where there is no mark as eloquent as the part of the sheet of the paper where there is a mark. The activity of those marks is such as it is because of the amount of untouched paper around it. And so the exact size of this drawing and the relation of these magical marks to where there aren't any magical marks is what makes the drawing so great. I feel when I look at this drawing by Van Gogh, a summer landscape, that I am absolutely there in this landscape with all this undergrowth, the earth under my feet, looking forever across this piece of landscape. It was all a great discovery to him. Every square inch of all this land in front of him, he was discovering with his eye and discovering with his pen how to make that particular bush or that particular horse, how to make the marks for those particular things, you know, with that pen at that moment, with this ink, right? And so he has discovered all of this, and we then, therefore, discover all of this. He's done the work, and we've the pleasure.
We're moving on now from old masters.
Yes, and whether this proves to be an old mistress or not, only time will tell. This is a drawing I did in 1982. Cedric Morris was a painter who, together with Les Haynes, were two of the people I began to paint with. Done in charcoal, and it was done from memory, having been with Cedric Morris lying in hospital about to die. Cedric's hands moved around in this groping kind of way, and all one could really do was to sit there and hold his hand if his hand came in your direction, because he was already pretty well in a world of his own. Anyway, I came back to London on the Sunday evening, and still this vision of this image of Cedric lying there was what was inside me. And so on the Monday morning, I took out this piece of paper and attempted to make this drawing of my memory of Cedric lying there. And it was quite, I remember distinctly I finished the drawing about 1 o'clock, and about 1:15 they telephoned to say that he had just died. So that was a sort of
It's just something that happened.
This drawing was done in 1985 on return from Barcelona, where I'd seen a bullfight. And it's called Descent of the Bull's Head, because it did seem to me that the position of the head of the bull in the course of a fight was significant, in that when the bull comes into the ring, the head is up and proud, and the bull is very fine and handsome and innocent and proud. And then during the course of the fight, he is more and more humiliated, and the head is gradually descending until it finally hits the ground, where it's dead. I'd actually spent about 3 days on a drawing of a standing bull, quite simple standing bullfighting bull. And it became more and more laboured, and it finally died. And I tore it up. And in this state of totally having given up, I thought, well, have one more go. And this drawing happened extremely quickly, in about 20 minutes, I think, without thinking. I mean, it was a drawing that just happened, which does occasionally happen, which is, I suppose, why one keeps doing it, because if we didn't have these moments, the whole thing would be just so masochistic. You don't feel as if you're doing it. You feel as if it's coming from somewhere else. And so you don't really feel responsible for it. I mean, I feel it came from somewhere else. This drawing was one in a series of 7 drawings I did of my mother lying in her coffin. That's almost 2 years ago now. It seemed the only thing to do, really. I mean, the right thing to do. So it's a drawing from life of my mother dead, or, I mean, a drawing from death. It's actually the stillest she ever managed to be for me, because when she posed and I would draw her when she was alive, she wasn't terribly good at it and moved a lot. But this time, she remained quite still. The drawing above it is of my father watching television, done very soon after my mother had died. I mean, he was in a state of grief and he was watching television, and so compared with a bull leaping round a ring, he was comparatively still.
Do you feel moved when you see your drawings now?
I'm moved by the subject that causes me to make the drawing. Right? I'm moved by something, therefore I make the drawing or I make the painting. And so it becomes something outside me. It doesn't move me anymore once I've done it. It has a life of its own. It's nothing more to do with me. I mean, I'm into the thrills and spills of the next bundle of problems, right? I mean, so this moving business is really other people's business. I mean, one is alive. One may be moved by a bullfight. One may be moved by one's mother lying dead. One may be moved by a sunrise. One may be moved by a tree. I don't think those things are really up to me. I think it's very important that one remains sufficiently vulnerable to be moved by things. But what actually moves me is up to life.
Is the artist really as passive as you seem to be projecting in what you say?
I don't think vulnerable means passive, does it? I mean, the capacity to respond is really what I'm talking about. To be sufficiently open to be moved by something, to respond to it. And then from that moment on, it's a job of work.
And passive wasn't perhaps the right word, but the impression I get from you is very much that you see being an artist as being a channel through which things flow.
Well, that's when it's going well. Quite a lot of the time, the channel's totally blocked up for various reasons. And, you know, you go through a lot of despair, a lot of despondency. But somebody, I can't remember who, possibly Roscoe, said that painting was an act of faith, and I agree with that. I mean, you've just got to keep doing it. I do the same thing every day. I come up here and I go through the same rituals beforehand. I go through the same rituals when I come into this room. And for days and days, or sometimes weeks and weeks, nothing happens. Everything goes wrong. And then, quite unaccountably, for maybe half an hour, something will go right. And I don't know why or how. Whatever you like.